Some years ago, there was a movie produced that was entitled The Man Who Played God. And the main character in the movie was a wealthy person who was also a great musician. But he was going deaf. And there was a point where he lost all hearing. And he became very embittered and very cynical. And he withdrew from his friends and even turned his back on God. He no longer believed in God. But this man started to learn how to read lips of people. And he used to practice by standing in his bedroom window, looking over at the park next door and trying to read the lips of passersby. One day there was a young man there that was praying in the park, and he was reading his lips, and the man was praying for a coat. It was very cold, and he had none. So the musician called in his butler and told him to take this warm coat down to that man in the park. And on another occasion, he was looking through his binoculars and he saw this woman who was stopping passersby and asking them, begging them for help, for food, for herself and her children. She had nothing in the house to feed them. She had no money. And so the man sent his butler down with enough money to feed the family for a couple of months and even pay their rent. And after each time that he did something like this, he lifted his head up to heaven and laughed at the face of God. He thought it was funny that he was playing God in whom he no longer believed. Well, the man kept doing this, and his sort of eccentric way of helping people. And he helped many people who were in dire straits and situations. He helped them. And over time, a strange and wonderful thing happened. The man who did not believe in God began to believe in God. By doing the work of God, he began to believe in a servant God. Well, we look at the gospel today, and it's not a pretty sight, is it? We see the apostles squabbling, arguing, fighting among themselves. Who is the greatest? Each wanted to be the greatest in the kingdom when Jesus came into his power. They wanted to sit at his right and his left, be his primary generals in this new kingdom. They had just not gotten Jesus' message, Jesus' teaching. It just went over their heads. And so he calls his 12 and sits them down and gives them a little lecture on what the meaning of greatness really is. Now, Jesus did not want to destroy ambition. On the contrary, he redefines it, and he wants his apostles to be ambitious to bring the good news of the gospel to others, ambitious to help the sick, the poor, the suffering of this world, ambitious to do God's will and work in this world. And he tells them what the true meaning of greatness is. It's not in ruling over others. It's not in seeking dominion over others. It's not in making your authority felt or lording it over other people. You know, there's a certain arrogance that we have in our lives that creates a tendency for us to lord it over others, whether it's over our spouse, our children, our siblings, or our friends. To be dominant is a real passion that sometimes develops because of our arrogance and our pride. And Jesus says that is not the way to be a follower of mine. If you want to be a follower of mine, he says, and to be really great, then you must be a servant, a humble servant. That is the true meaning of greatness. It's not as the world looks upon greatness, but the true meaning is to humbly serve the needs of others. And if you want to be the greatest of all, be the servant of all the rest. And so he takes a little child, puts this child in their midst as an example. Now, this child is not, in this case, an example of innocence. This child is an example of not having any power. In that culture especially, children had no status, no power, no say over anything. And Jesus says, look, if you want to be my disciple, you got to be it this way. And also seek to serve those without power. You know, probably we can more easily serve those who are great around us because we feel honored by our association with them. And there may be a reward somewhere along the line. But the real test is to serve those who cannot reward us, who cannot return the favor, for the poorest of the poor, those who are most in need. That's the real test of a servant of Christ. And, you know, it's Jesus himself who gives us the true example. What did he do? He reached out to the poor, the lonely, the sick, the suffering, the outcast. Those are the ones that he really went out to and touched. And he gave the greatest service of all, of course, in his suffering and death on Calvary. So if you want to be a follower of Jesus, look for real greatness. Have great ambition. But the true ambition and the true greatness of humble service in your home, first of all, in your community, in your parish, and wherever you are with others. Be a humble servant because we have a servant God. I have a little prayer I'd like to share with you. I entitled this prayer, Servant Lord. Jesus, you are Lord of all, the greatest of all time. Yet you demonstrate the truth. Humble service is sublime. You redefine true ambition. It does not dominate. It does not lord it over one. It gives and does not take. You show us where true greatness is, not in power, not in wealth, nor in seeking to be master, but in the losing of oneself. Teach us true humility, generosity we implore, to be a servant, loving all, like you, O servant Lord.